Okay, today we are going to be looking at the Field Guide to Otherkin by Lupa. This is from 2007, and I think it's a really interesting look at what was originally an extremely small, obscure niche subculture that has ended up, I think, being disproportionately influential. And it has all sorts of interesting ties to 20th century counterculture, to neo-paganism and esoteric cults and fandoms, and sort of at the intersection of all those things. We're not going to read a lot of this. We're just going to read the first few pages. The author of this, Lupa, as you could maybe guess from the name, identifies as a wolf spirit in some way. But we'll just dive into the first few pages of chapter 1, read it together, think about it, and then if you have any questions or comments, please add them in the comments below. Welcome to a field guide to Otherkin. This isn't a traditional field guide with tons of statistics and taxonomy and full-color pictures of assorted species. It is, however, a practical guide to the Otherkin subculture, designed for use by both kin and non-kin alike. In the following pages, you'll read about who and what Otherkin are, who or what we identify with, and what brings us to our conclusions about ourselves, and what we can do with that identity. However, like a traditional field guide, this book is presented as information gained from experience in the field itself. I've been exploring my wolf side for over a decade, and have interacted with numerous other kin, both in person and online. In addition, I'm presenting the information as an invitation for others to explore whether kin or not. If you identify as otherkin, or at least suspect that you may be, then some of this book might seem quite familiar to you. You may have already read something on the internet, or happened across an article or book that mentions us. Or you may simply suspect that there's something not quite human about you, and are curious to see if others' experiences match your own. On the other hand, you may even already be immersed in the otherkin community, or someone who decided to drop out for whatever reason. So right from the get-go, we have this doubt being expressed about human identity, and it's already being sort of correlated with participating in an internet community. So, very interesting idea. There are these internet communities that exist of people who doubt their full humanity. If you're not otherkin, chances are good that you may look askance at whoever introduced you to the idea of otherkin. Don't feel bad. A lot of us question the concept heavily when we first encounter it too, even if we like the idea of it. In fact, some of the otherkin reading this may be wondering if this isn't just all in our heads. Being non-human in a human society is a concept that can be a little tough to wrap your mind around if you're new to it. That sort of thinking tends to get relegated to ancient mythology or mental insanity. Either way, it involves detachment from the common perception of reality. The key to understanding, however, lies in the open mind. So you can see just from this paragraph, the author is being extremely reasonable in how they're presenting themselves, and is aware of the immediate concerns that any normal person is going to have. And so they're not, they may be crazy, but they're going about their craziness in an extremely sane and reasonable way. When studying any subculture, it's important to approach it with cultural objectivity, judging the people by their own standards instead of yours. It's especially important in light of the fact that the very basis of otherkin, the belief that a person can be something other than human, is easily labeled as delusional. Looking at the belief objectively, I gotta flip over to the other side here. However, how is believing that you are an elf in a past life any stranger than believing that a deity manifested on earth in human form, or that certain humans chosen by the divine were taken to the afterlife corporeally, or that ordinary bread and wine can be transmuted into literal flesh and blood? Or, for that matter, if you're a neo-pagan who believes in fairies and dragons and animal spirits, is it that much more difficult to believe that such beings can manifest into human bodies, particularly if you believe that it's not just humans that reincarnate? So I think that totally makes sense as a point. If you believe in reincarnation or are a neo-pagan, then, Otherkin really is just a normal extension of that. But it's very interesting that the author claims that basic Christian theology is just as strange as the claims of being an Otherkin. So Otherkin theological or spiritual claims should be treated with the same degree of sincerity, which I think that is a idea that could be interrogated. Whose authority are we basing this off of? The feelings that people get in their heart and in their soul, is that to be equated with sort of the prophetic speech or the miraculous works of Jesus Christ himself, or of individuals in the past? How do we? It's still worth asking. How do we weigh those things? Why is someone's just sort of feelings about who they are in their spirit, and the ideas that they attach to it of like, oh, I feel like an animal, how is that different or in a different category than spiritual sentiments that we might get by participating in communion and really feeling the presence of God in it? And we'll hopefully get to come back to that question, but we'll move on. Still, people have a tendency to judge by their own standards. It's imperative that in order to understand Otherkin in a relatively objective manner, that this tendency should be set aside for the time being. This doesn't mean that you have to automatically believe everything that's said, or even any of it, but true skepticism, not debunking, with which skepticism has been mistakenly interchanged, demands entering into a discussion with as little bias as possible, so that all arguments may be accepted and weighed equally. Okay, so to the atheistic skeptics, that doesn't mean just dismissing spiritual claims. It means being willing to be skeptical of common sense as well. All right. This is only one viewpoint on the Otherkin subculture. We'll skip down to their terms here. Okay. So different Otherkin terms. While some elves tend to see themselves as a separate group from fairy beings, others have included themselves under that heading. Some elves have recreated a number of possible historical details from past life, memories involving their cultures and worldviews. Fae can refer to everything from pixies to trolls to hookahs. Many resemble Eurocentric mythos, particularly Celtic, Norse, or Germanic folklore, or modern derivatives such as Tolkien. So you have some people who are claiming to have memories of being a past life as an elf, or not just any elf, but specifically a Tolkien-style elf. Therianthropes. These are people who identify as earth-based animals in some respect. The species represented tend to be wolves, big cats, and other more impressive animals, but I've seen horse, rabbit, deer, and even dinosaur, earwig, and kiwi Therians, either in person or online. Very key detail there. Some Therianthropes distance themselves from the Otherkin heading, finding it to be too fantastic to be believed, or just considering everything else to be a little too flaky since they identify with make-believe beings, though others are content to be included in that group. Oh, so that's very interesting. So even among people who have these different identities, there's debate about what counts as legitimate. If you're seeing your deep spiritual identity as a make-believe creature, can we take that as seriously as someone who deep down believes that they're a wolf, which we all know that wolves really do materially exist. So is that a more legitimate spiritual claim to make? Mythological animals, okay, dragons, unicorns, griffins, vampires. Oh, of course. Vampires tend to be categorized into two groups, psychic and sanguine. The former feeds primarily on pure energy, while the latter must take energy via blood to be healthy. Psychic vampires. It's a pretty big scene, or at least it was in the 90s. I don't know if that still is a big thing anymore, but yeah, it's obviously associated with goth subculture. Angel kin and demon kin, kitsune. Specifically imagine yourself as a magical Japanese fox rather than just a general fox. Multiples and walk-ins. Okay, that's pretty demonic sounding. Even more than how demonic it may have been up to this point. These are not necessarily always otherkin, as both groups have folks who are entirely human. There is a sizable portion of the kin community, though, who attribute their being other to being walk-ins and or multiples. Okay, so again, that if you accept the logic that deepest spirituality is what you become convinced in your imagination that you are deep in your soul, then why is it that you can't be multiple people, or to be a host to different souls kind of coming back and forth? That follows from those premises. And then finally, and this is my most favorite one, otaku-kin or media-kin, a highly controversial group. Opinions vary as to whether or not they're truly otherkin or a separate phenomenon. These are people who identify with characters or species from various media, such as anime, manga, fantasy books and movies, and video games. Many maintain that these media are just modern mythology, and that traditional mythology was just our ancestors' version of pop culture. So again, this makes total sense that if you can be a wolf soul deep down, then why can't you be manga soul deep down? Why can't I deep down have the soul of Goku, or the soul of a Pokemon, or something like that? It's, are they really that spiritually different? But I think it's funny that there are these hypothetical otherkin dogmatists out there who, that's not serious. You can't be Pikachu souled because Pikachu doesn't exist. I'm wolf souled because wolves really do exist. I really do have the soul of a wolf, but you don't really have the soul of Pikachu. Who's to say anymore? All right. So I think there's so many spiritual questions that are raised by this. And this book goes on. I mean, it's 300 pages. I'd recommend flipping through it. It's free on the Internet Archive here. There's these ideas of who your soul is, and rather than just assuming like I am my body and my soul inhabits my body, it seems like people who spend too much time on the internet, or spend too much time with fantasy fiction, or spend too much time with video games, they begin to think of themselves in these sort of external ways of, oh, this body is just something that I happen to be in at the moment, but my true self could be something else that I'm imaginatively fixated on in some way. And I think we can see that as being an increasingly relevant problem. People don't want to accept their physical selves, or the limitations of their physical selves. It seems unpleasant to them in some way. You have a lot of men becoming women, or pursuing womanhood because they're ashamed of being men, or they feel dirty or weird about being a man, or they just become sexually fixated on being a woman, or for whatever the emotional cause is there, or if it's just truly innate, if they truly feel that way from birth. Either way, the physical isn't cutting it, and to be able to live this virtual life where I'm this thing that is cool and beautiful and powerful, rather than presumably what I feel like when I go about outdoors in my normal sort of fleshly limitations. I think that would be my guess, that this is really powered by overactive imagination and envy and disappointment with just who they materially are. Material limitations are sad, and the internet and video games are fun. So by just leaning into that imagination as much as possible, can I spiritually become something that materially I'm not? That's I think a key dilemma for our generation as our lifestyle becomes even more and more virtual. I mean, I've never struggled with the spiritual sense that my identity was not what my physical body was. But I had many friends who did, and probably from the time that I've been 10 years old, I've spent hours on the internet every day and in video games and media and that sort of things. And so I think that sort of deep immersion in virtual realities does change the way that your mind relates to your body. I think you do become sort of different from other people. And there might be spiritual implications about that. And I don't think that's entirely a good thing, as you can imagine. But different people process that in different ways, and they come up with a story of, oh, I feel this disconnect from my body because deep down I'm an elf soul. So I think it's really easy to mock these people or to deride them, but I think this writer, at least, is being very reasonable and sort of laying things out very modestly, of if what's ultimate truth is just what you become imaginatively convinced of, then who's to say that these people aren't onto something? Maybe they are more than human or less than human or something like that. But of course, where this gets creepy is thinking about the limitations of this, or the origins of this, of like what is causing them to feel this way, and where does it lead to if you're feeling like you're multiple people. How does that not just culminate in schizophrenia or demonic possession or something like that? I think it should be fairly obvious that you are your body, and your body is a good thing, even with its sort of limitations or the things about it that aren't as fun or pleasant that you might want it to be. And attempts to try and reconfigure it are, that's dangerous territory in so many different ways. Anyway, so if you want to dig further into this, please do share me your thoughts. I haven't read through the full thing. I read through the first part of it, and I found that fascinating, and so we'll maybe pick up this thread again some other time.